Okay, guys, this is our read aloud story this 9 weeks. It's a realistic fiction. So what does that mean? Raising hands, realistic fiction. All hands should be up. Nazir, what does it mean?
It means that some parts is real and some parts are fiction.
Good, some parts are real, some parts are fiction. Ethan? So real people fake story, good. Last one.
Something that's real but the people make it seem like it's
Excellent. Because it's fiction, it is not a true story, but the realistic side says that they're taking facts and real things that happened in history, and then they're just making up a story about it. So it'd be like at 3rd Street, if 3rd Street is real and has students, right? But then somebody writes a story about 3rd Street and changes the names and has a Mr. Smith teacher, and he's really mean, and he throws chairs. 3rd Street's real. It is a school, it has students, but they're making a story about it. It's not real. And that's what this story does too. This looks at the Middle Ages, when there were knights, kings, monasteries, and it tells a fake story, but it uses real facts from history. So we're going to read this every day. We're going to read possibly a chapter a day, because the chapters are not too terribly long, but sometimes we might not make the whole chapter. But I will be asking questions, we'll answer. Sometimes we'll write answers, sometimes we'll just talk answers, sometimes you'll talk with your partners about answers. Okay? But for today, we're just going to really just kind of read it, maybe discuss a few things, but nothing really extreme. We're just going to start our story today. So this book's name is The King's Shadow. So who can tell me, if you just hear The King's Shadow, what do you think this book might be about? So the first title, all I know, King's Shadow. If I look at the picture, it shows this guy, looks like he's writing, and it almost looks like there's like a shadow of faded ghost behind him. So what do I think the story might be about The King's Shadow? Good job, Nazir, being one to share. Go ahead.
It's about a great king that died, and he's probably looking over somebody else is going to be the king.
Okay, that was a really good prediction. Nazir said it's probably maybe about a king who died, and so it's talking about like someone else who's going to have to be king. That's a good prediction. I like that one. Anybody else? Ty.
The story might be like somebody's in the king's shadow, like the king is just taking up, like you will have a friend and then there's a king in the city next week and the king is just saying his name so much you might call your friend what the king's name is and stuff, but like kind of like the king's shadow, like you will be talking about something and the king just comes up and interrupts you.
Okay.
Stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely could be. All right. Well, the author of this one is Elizabeth Elder, and we're going to go ahead and jump into it. Now, for read aloud, I got it up here already. There's a certain way we do read aloud. So I have everybody's eyes minus 2 people, give me all eyes. Read aloud. Later in the year, you'll have your own book. To start, we're all going off the book I'm reading. So if you have your own book, just stay on the same page. Number 2 is important. Engage in conversation. So if I share a question, I should see all hands go up. I want everyone to be engaged, listening, and discussing it. If we break off and I say, okay, there's a group, I'm putting on Ethan, talk about blank question. Then when I look over there, I see both of them talking and engaging and conversating. Number 3, wait, and this is an important one. Everyone eyes on board. Number 3, Nick. Wait until Mr. Clark has finished reading before you raise your hand to ask a question. That's so important. I do want to talk to you if you have a question, but if I'm in the middle of reading, just wait. Don't raise your hand yet because it's distracting to everybody. Just listen, and then when I stop, raise your hand. Okay? 4, record all summaries, questions, and notes in your writing journal. That's a good thing we just made a writing journal that we can record all of our information or questions or summaries in that journal. And then finally, number 5, when the time is over, put books exactly where they belong on your desk. In this case, it would be your writing journal because you don't actually have a book at your desk right now. Okay? So, everybody's eyes should be on me. That tells me you are listening. It tells me you're engaged. When I ask a question, I want to see you guys raising hands to engage with me, okay? Nick, can you put your book away for me? Just to make sure everybody's focused and engaged. All right. So if you look at the first part, it shows a map of England and France and Europe. So this again, we talked about realistic fiction. This is a real place in the world. So it's playing off of real facts, but the story itself is going to be fake. Starts off, title says, the year is 1063. So that's over, not quite 1,000 years. It's close to 1,000 years ago when they're saying the story took place. It says, in this year, my reckless young uncle returned, bringing death as his companion. Thunder rumbled in the distance, like the growl of angry wolves. What does an angry wolf sound like? You can imagine how loud this thunder is, right? Evie scrambled up the rocky hillside. Above him, the dark clouds hung low and swollen over the rounded hills of Carmel. When he reached the top, he saw that it was already raining on the westernmost ridge of the hills. Far below him, 3 hooded shepherds urged their flock back to the stockade settlement. If he hurried, he would have time to recite the chant once more before he needed to get under shelter. He had been so busy with the sheep that he not had the chance to practice for nearly a week. Now, it was Easter Sunday already, the day he had been waiting for so long. So already you've got a character, right? And what is the character doing? He's coming back from doing what?
Fighting?
He said, I was so busy with the sheep.
Oh, born. You can't
So
fight.
there's something to do with sheep, animals, and they just said that he saw 3 shepherds. So most likely it sounds like he's some type of shepherd. But also, he wants to practice chanting? I don't know. Let's find out more. Evie filled his lungs with the cold, hill air again. High are the hills and dark the valleys. Round are the rocks and dread the defiles. When Roland sees the peers and Oliver, whom he so loved, lying dead, pity takes him, and he begins to weep. So great is his grief, he cannot stand. The boy's voice, melon tenor, flowed like the water of a deep river, but the chant suddenly stopped. So if you said you had a voice that flowed like the water of a deep river, what kind of voice do you think it sounds like? Think about a deep river. Like, think about the Tar River. When you see it flowing, is it like choppy and going all crazy?
No.
It's what?
It's calm.
So I heard someone say it.
Calm.
Smooth. So his voice, think about somebody you see on TV with a very deep, smooth. Yeah. Come on, Bryson. You got that fuzzy chair waiting for you right there. So this guy, his voice is very smooth and pleasant to listen to. Glory be, he swore. What is the next line? He could never remember it. He would make a fool of himself in front of the entire settlement if he forgot tonight. Ooh. Sounds like he's going to try to do this in front of the entire settlement. Who here's ever tried to give a speech in front of an entire crowd? Got hands down? Who here's ever been really nervous to give a speech in front of an entire crowd?
All of us.
He's about to give a speech in front of an entire city. So, probably a little nervous. Let's find out. It was not every day that a serf was called upon to recite at his Lord's Easter festival. Evie had memorized the Song of Roland, one verse at a time from the Wandering Storettes. If he could read, it would be easier. But of course, Evie could not read. None but the monks could read. And even if he could, there were no books to be had in sleepy Carmethel. Beautiful Carmethel, dull little outpost on the western edge of the kingdom of the Angles and the Saxons. Evie plucked absent-mindedly at the new spring grass as he repeated the verse, hoping to commit the words to memory. How he longed to tell the story of Roland, who, as leader of Charlemagne's rear guard, had chosen to stand and fight and die to protect the king from his enemies. High are the hills. The lad was blessed with a steward's voice. He counted himself lucky for that good fortune. Although his voice had changed in the last year, it retained its rich and even ring, and the added depth was like a coating of honey. So in other words, he's like, I'm not going to brag, but my voice is dynamite. Like if I talk, people will listen. So apparently he's been given a very good voice, very rich voice, and he's learned stories that different people call the stories. And so we'll have to find out later who are these guys. But also we found out something. He cannot what? What can he not do? He said only the monks can do this. Let's hear it. That's exactly right. He could not read. Great job, Nazir. He said that he's had to learn this from just finding people at a time who would tell him the story. And then he had to memorize it. Can you imagine how hard that would be?
Yeah.
To sit there and say, hey guys, here's a book, but if you can't read it, you just got to listen to me read it and then memorize it.
The whole thing.
That's what he's having to do because he can't read. Only the monks can read. So very hard. Let's keep going. High are the hills and dark the valleys. His people, Shemri, whom outsiders called Welsh, or sometimes British, treasured their storytellers. Indeed, stories were respected throughout all the northern lands. Okay, so there. It just gave us context clues. What's a story? What's a store that he was getting his information from? Let's try again. I'll go back and read it. Yeah, let's tell him what it is. His people, the Cymri, whom outsiders called Welsh, or sometimes British, treasured their storytellers. Indeed, storers were respected throughout all the northern lands. What's a storer? It's spread throughout all land, but what does a storer do? It said right before that sentence, it said what they were. Ethan? I'll read it a third time. If you can't get it, take it. If people can't answer, we'll take 5 minutes off for test. Listen. His people, the Shimri, whom outsiders called Welsh, or sometimes British, treasured their storytellers. Indeed, storers were respected throughout all the northern lands. What is a storer? We're so close. We treasure their stories. So what is a storer? They're storytellers. Storytellers. Good job. They were storytellers. Hence, their name almost sounds like story. Storer. They're storytellers. Evie knew his voice might earn him some slim chance of escape from the narrow life of a land-bound servant. By law, he was a free man. Good for him. But in practice, he was tied to the land like his father, and his father's father before him. So in other words, he's technically free, but guess what? He can't leave the place he's at. So that'd be like saying, hey guys, hey, so you're free, but you gotta stay in Greenville. You can never leave Greenville. But you're free. Do whatever you want in Greenville, but you can't leave Greenville. You gotta stay here. So are you really free?
No.
No, that's very much a limited freedom. Okay? But a storer was able to roam wherever he pleased, for every landowner was obliged to offer hospitality in return for a tale. Tonight was Evie's chance. If he told the story well, it might change his destiny. He could lift himself and his father up from the cold, spare life. So is this a big deal? Everyone say, yeah.
Yeah.
If he can tell a story good enough to where the people like it, then they can maybe make him a storer, and then he doesn't have to stay in the land anymore. He can roam wherever he wants and share stories. So it's a big deal. So he's pretty nervous. A damp breeze struck Evie in the face. As he stood, as he shook the black hair out of his eyes, he noticed a traveler cresting the hill, an arrow shot away from him. So cresting the hill, so they're just coming over the top of the hill. And about an arrow shots away, so maybe like that tree over there in the playground. So a little way away, but not too bad. The stranger trudged towards Rollowan's stockade den, built where the slope leveled at Evie's back. Evie squinted for a better look. Travelers were so rare. The stranger was a grown man, yet still young, like Evie's. His hair shone blue-black and hung long and straight over his neck. He was built neither tall nor broad, but wiry, like many of the British people. On his back, he carried a worn traveling sack. His walk was steady, like that of one who has been on a long journey. But as he spied the walls of Rollowan's den, he broke into an easy trot. His movement flushed a raven, black as starless night, from the roadside ditch. The startled scavenger flapped across the man's path, pawing angrily at him. The man stopped, stiff in his tracks. Among the hill people, it was a bad omen to be raven shadowed. The messenger of death, Evie thought. Watching the bird disappear into the gray mist, the traveler seemed distraught for a moment, but then he made the sign of the cross and continued on his way. Evie studied the stranger in silence. As the man passed unaware along the road below the boy's hilltop ledge, his face is so familiar. A spot of color high on his cheek, brightening a pale complexion. So like his father and so like Evie himself. The boy allowed the stranger to pass without calling out. Usually, Evie stopped every traveler to ask about the news he might carry. That was how he had learned a little English from tinkerers and merchants. This was different. He was not eager to befriend a raven-shadowed man. No doubt he is a wandering tradesman, hoping for a bit of work, he thought. However, the man left the trail that led toward Rollowan's hall. He turned to the hut Evie shared with his father. When the man ducked inside without the proper courtesy of calling out beforehand, the boy's alarm grew. His father wasn't expecting anyone. Evie raced down the hill. All thought of the song of Roland had gone from his head. As the wind rushed past his face, he felt the last few stray drops of rain. Glancing up, he saw the distant hills were hidden now by the dark clouds. He scuttled crab-like down the steepest part of the hill. Who's ever tried to go down a real steep hill? Can you just like walk down the hill?
No.
A lot of times like you're sliding or you try to slide down it. So that's what he's doing. He sees it, he's terrified because he doesn't know the stranger. And technically, the stranger just had a raven go by, which is like the messenger of death in their culture. And then to make matters worse, he went straight to his dad's house. So in his head he's thinking, oh crap. Like his worst fear is probably like this guy's about to kill somebody. Something's about to happen. So he's terrified. He's taking off trying to get there as fast as he can. So he scuttled crab-like down the steepest part of the hill and flew over the ground, hardly aware of his surroundings. The village girls bring in the sheep and lambs from the common field, his neighbor's flock of geese squawking angrily as he dashed through the mist. He reached his hut and darted inside. how surprised he was to see his father and the stranger locked in a hearty embrace. "You will stay with us, of course," Evie's father was saying. The stranger stared dubiously around the tiny one-room hut. It was barely 3 strides from wall to wall. The wind whistled through chinks where the drab had chipped away, and only a few poor tunics hung on pegs by the door. "Have you room for me?" he asked. "Too much room," Evie's father said. The smile melted from his face. "Joan and the little ones all died from a fever that swept the village last winter." Evie glanced at the empty spot where his mother had slept with his baby sisters, and the heaviness returned to his heart. The past months had been a sad time. "Evie, you're back," his father said, glad to think of something else. "Come, give a greeting to your Uncle Morgan." Uncle? Eve felt a fool, and the color in his cheeks heightened. So the mysterious stranger was his relative. He should have guessed it. The man was so like his father. "Uncle, I welcome you." "I thank you, nephew." Uncle Morgan sized Eve up and down like a crafty horse trader. "You stood less than your father's built last time I saw you, and now," he said with a grin, "you must have seen 13 winters. Is that not right?" "Look at you," his father broke in. "You've changed much as well. You left a skinny and restless youth, what was it, 8, 9 years ago? And look at you now, a grown man with arms as muscled as any blacksmith." Evie studied his uncle and was amazed at similarities between the two men before him. They stood eye to eye in height, neither one too broad or too lean. Each had each had hair dark as pitch and eyes gray as the sea. Their skin was pale except for the blush high on their cheeks. Each wore dark pants in the British style with brown tunics belted at the waist. So alike on the outside, yet, if the tales are true, so different in their hearts. For Evie's father was a calm and patient man, slow to anger, steady as the hills, while Evie could see that his uncle was all fluid movement and excitement. The story his father had told of his wild and dangerous younger brother had been of a reckless youth and finally a desperate heart. We'll stop here. Here's what I want you to do so far. So you're going to take out your writing journals. Go to topic 2. So you're going to your second topic. Lord, anyways. So topic 2. Here's what you're going to do. I want you simply give me a summary of what has happened in this first part that we have just read. So who can tell? So summary, you can tell me who we read about. You can tell me where they are. What does it look like? Describe it. What are they doing? Okay. Why are they doing this? These are all things you can add in your summary. Who has happened so far? Where are they? What are they doing? Why are they doing that? Okay, so right now it's your turn, and what you're going to do first, Tom, we're still yours. First, you're going to go to the table of contents page, and you're just going to write first summary. What you're going to write. Because we didn't finish the whole chapter. First summary. And that'll be your topic. So page 2, first summary. And then you'll go to page 2 and write your summary. Okay?
Wait, what?
For the topic, you're going to write first summary. That's your topic on the table of contents. Then you're going to turn over to the page it's going to be on and start writing your summary. Go ahead, so you have to write in journal for me. check, make sure everybody's write it in the right spot on the table of contents, because if you don't, then you'll mess up. So right here, right here, first summary. That's what you do. Right, so that's going there. Easy. You're good, it's right here, first summary, and then get the what's up?
What's the nephew's name again?
The nephew's name? Is it Evie?
Evie? Evie.
Yes, Ethan. Place it up. Just do the best you can with stuff. Okay. Some of these are just really words that we wouldn't know very well because they're coming from a time it's not ours. So a lot of these words, even for me when I'm reading, it's a struggle because these are from almost 1,000 years ago. Words that we don't use anymore. So do the best you can. First time we got it, perfect. Tell me about what you just think about. Who was it about? Guys, again, don't get stuck. Just think. Who was it about? Where were they at? Like, if you can't remember the name of the city, describe where he was at. What does it look like? Okay? Because it talked a lot about the hills he was around. It's on the western side of like England. What was he doing? He was doing something at the beginning and it changed. Why was he doing that?